Preferences are used to help the developer establish a Photoshop environment that is more enjoyable and to allow them to create an environment that makes it easy to work with. And as you can see right here, the Windows preferences are a little bit different than that of the Mac. And let's take a look here. I've got a screenshot of the Windows preferences. And in Windows, you go to the Edit button and scroll all the way down to Preferences. And ultimately, it'll take you to the same dialog box as you see in the Mac version of Photoshop. There you go to Photoshop Preferences and then click on General and you'll reach this dialog box over here. We will immediately start with the General tab. As you can see on the left hand side, you've got a lot of options and it starts off with General. And the first thing I want to point out is where the check mark is. Now, a lot of times you'll open up the preferences and you'll see that Adobe had already created check marks. And the reason is because these are preferences that are pretty much set by default. Adobe believes that these settings can benefit you, and generally speaking they will. So most people probably prefer that they have a previously selected checkbox for them. And in this case, you have the auto show the home screen, which I think it's very, very beneficial. And I used to not like the home screen, but as time went by, here it is right here, you'll see right in front of you. I actually enjoy the home screen. I think it's very beneficial. You can access presets, you can access the Creative Cloud, you can store your files in the Creative Cloud, you can actually have access to the latest and most recent work that you worked on. I think it's all beneficial. I think it really works. On the very top, you'll notice that I've highlighted Color Picker, and you see a miniature version of the Color Picker right before your screen here. And this is a very important feature in Photoshop, and we will pretty much use the Color Picker throughout the entire course. So get used to seeing this site right here. And as we move forward, the next thing I would like you to see is the HUD color picker. What does HUD stand for? Heads Up Display, HUD, Heads Up Display. And as you can see on the right side over there, you have a color picker, a different kind of color picker, if you will. And basically, well, I'll show you. What I'm going to do right now is select and when I click on the drop-down menu, I've got other options, and I'm just going to go ahead and choose this one here, which is called the hub wheel. Okay, and there are different options, but we'll show you what the hub wheel is. And here's a color picker again. This is what we're going to be using. I just thought it might be fun to kind of show you if you do use it. So first of all, what I normally do is I create a circle here, and then I select the paint bucket tool. Press Control Command Shift all at the same time. Okay, and you'll see what happens now. Watch now as I do that. Boom, there it is right there, and I'm basically able to select any kind of color I want. So in other words, I have the color picker right in front of me. And if you look to the miniature graphic on the left side, you'll notice that the foreground color is actually being updated as I scroll through. Eventually I'll select a color and I will fill in that circle. Now the only thing, of course, is that once again the color picker offers a lot of information, a lot of really valuable input that I can put in, for instance the RGB and the CYMK. So more than likely we're going to stick with the color picker, but the HUD wheel, well, that's a fun little feature. Okay, returning back to the preference dialog box, we're going to go to the next set, which is the appearance. Now this is really cool. So the first thing you see are these series of boxes on the very top, the color theme. Well, what is a color theme? Well, let me demonstrate. When I zoom out a little bit, you'll notice that I can press on this box, which is all black, then a little bit grayer, and a little bit lighter, and a little bit lighter. Wow, talk about needing sunglasses. I prefer the darker mode, okay, but this is up to you. You decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. If this is the environment that you enjoy, well, that's great. But I kind of like it more dark because the text stick out more and the images stick out more, but to each his own. And pretty much I'm not going to be touching anything else here. Everything else is set accordingly. So in this lesson, I'm not going to go to every detail of the preferences. Some things are just there. You just leave it alone, and we'll move on to the next one, which is the workspace. And in the workspace, already you've got certain things that are highlighted. Okay, and the most important one is this one right here. Basically, this opens documents tabs. Oh, that is very important. So it used to be that Photoshop, whenever you open an image, it has floating documents. In other words, like every image would float around and there would be no tabs on the very top. And let me demonstrate what I mean by tab. So as you can see right now, where the check boxes are, I've got those two tabs. Those are two separate images, and they're up there. And it wasn't like the old days where you have images kind of float around in the workspace. Having tabs is very beneficial. I can work with several different types of images, and well, it's just convenient for us. Next, we're going to go into the Tools dialog, and pretty much, again, I'm not going to explain everything, but I would like to focus on the first two check marks. One is called Show Tooltips, and the other one is called Show Rich Tooltips. Well, what's the difference? Okay, now, well, let's start by me for deselecting the Show Rich Tooltips. And let's see what happens when I press OK. So what the tooltips are, basically when I hover over a tool in the toolbar, okay, it gives an explanation of what that tool is. As you can see, it'll tell you things like elliptical marquee tool, and then eventually the lasso tool and the magic wand tool. So that is really helpful, especially for beginners who may not be familiar with. Now going back to the same dialog box, and let's go ahead and go back to tools again, and this time I'm going to check the rich tool tips. Well, watch this magic. Instead of just kind of telling me what the tool is, it gives me video demonstration of what the tool does, and I think that is really, really cool. So Adobe does it good, and that's good. All right, the next one is called the history log. Again, I don't really use this one. This is basically used in case if you want to download or save every step you make, every move you make, and pretty much it downloads as a text file. So I never do that, and I don't see any reason for me to do that. We're not gonna, if you want to do that, you can check it and eventually download it, but I think that's a little too much. The next thing we're going to do is the file saving options. Now, this is really important because sometimes when we work, we tend to forget to save our work, and that could be catastrophic, especially, I mean, I can tell you stories of myself when, like, I'm working and I'm 2 hours in and I never save my work, which is really foolish. And back in the day of the desktops, sometimes there's a huge power outage, and well, my work is gone. But Photoshop, and especially the Adobe Creative Suite, decided that, well, we're going to autosave this work for you, which I think is very convenient. And you see where the checkbox is, saved as to original folder. That means the folder where you open the work, that's where it's going to be saved as. Okay, the next one is save in the background. So when you do autosave, even while you're working, even while you're doing things, your other images are still going to be saved while you're working. That's what I mean. It kind of updates files and makes sure that all the files and all the latest works are preserved, and that is done when you're not looking. So that's really helpful. And how often do it? Well, here I set it at 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes I need you to save my file, whether I like it or not. But it's always a very good habit to, whenever you're thinking about it, save your work. Save your work within just a few minutes. Next thing we're going to talk about is exporting. Exporting again, I don't really use this feature because I always save as. I'm not sure the purpose behind all this, but let me just go ahead and show you what I mean. Again, I use save or save as. I don't use export. And if I want to change it into the PNG file that you see up there in the drop-down menu, I would just save as a PNG. So if I want to save this image, I'm going to go to File and then Export, and then Quick Export as PNG. Okay, well there it is. If you want to use that, you can, but again, like I said, I just go to File, Save As. Alright, now this is a really important one, the performance. Now this has to do with memory usage. Now you know that Photoshop is a beast when it comes to using RAM. And it uses a lot of RAM. It uses a lot of disk space, and we'll talk about that when we go into Scratch Disk. There are some limits you can set with Photoshop. For instance, right here I have it set that Photoshop will not be allowed to utilize 70% of your RAM resources. Now, if it goes up to 70%, I don't know what it is that you're doing, but it should never be allowed to go that high. And so you want to make sure it doesn't utilize all the RAM just so you can use other applications. 70% is really high. And you can always adjust it down by sliding to the left or to the right. You can allow more, although I think putting to the right is kind of foolish, but I guess 70% is a safe bet. That was the default. I just leave it alone. And Scratch Disk. Oh yes, this is a very, very interesting one. And you see that I have two different drives here. The Elements that you see over there is actually my external hard drive. And below that is my Macintosh SSD. That is my hard drive that's inside my computer. Now, what is a Scratch Disk? Well, a Scratch Disk basically stores a whole lot of files that you don't even know about. Now, why does Photoshop produce this file? Well, again, it is a monster beast. It takes up a lot of resources. Not only RAM, but also look at all those files that Photoshop produces while you work. And this is just from a few images here. It just keeps going on and on and on. Well, think of this way. Photoshop is like an airplane. And if you've been to an airport, you'll know that some of these jumbo 747s or the 737s, well, they need a lot of room to take off and land. Okay, there's a lot of space in an airport. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of room to the left, there's a lot of room to the right, and there's a lot of room above. You need acres and acres and acres of territory for a plane to operate. Well, Photoshop is the same way. You need a lot of space in your hard drive, you need a lot of RAM, and yeah, it's a hog. It takes up a lot of stuff over here. What really is annoying is when you get this little message right here. Boom. Okay, could not initialize Photoshop because the Scratch disks are full. Well, that is so downright annoying. What I normally do is just make sure that all the garbage is placed in the external hard drive. That way it doesn't impact performance of my computer. So here are some tips that you can use to basically remove excess files. Like I said, move all files into an external hard drive. If you're using Windows, there are certain tools. One of them is called a disk cleanup that can help you eradicate certain unnecessary files. For the Mac, there's an app called Clean My Mac, which I use, and that does a really great job. You can try and empty the cache. I would show you how. I would Google it, and you can find it and administer it. And in Photoshop, there's a thing called Purge History. So that allows you to kind of remove old files that are no longer being used. And of course, you can remove temp files. Again, you can Google all this. Every computer is different. Every operating system is different. And let's go ahead and move on. The next one is called the cursor, and this is really important because with the cursor, you need to basically use the cursor for brush strokes, for erasers, and more, as we'll find out. So right now, I have it set at normal brush tip, which is the default, and I suggest you keep it there. But in case you're wondering how the others are, well, let's go ahead and click on standard, and you look at the very image on the right above it towards the right. You'll notice that the image changed to a paintbrush. That's the standard cursor. It doesn't look so standard to me, but I guess it's based on the tools that you're using. Then this is precise. That is the crosshair. And yeah, it gets pretty precise because it doesn't really allow for much room for mistakes. So that tells you exactly where the image will be drawn and the space that it's going to take up. But I still like the normal brush tip. The normal brush tip, of course, you notice that the diameter of the brush is pretty much how you're going to draw. Now this is a crazy one, the full-size brush tip. Now I don't see the purpose of this. The brush tip's a little bit bigger, but I'm going to go back to the normal brush tip and leave it at there. Now here's a really fun looking thing that Photoshop has installed. It's called a brush preview. So what this does, it allows you to kind of see what a brush looks like and also set how hard or how soft the brush can produce strokes or paint or whatever you need for it to do. So right now a brush preview has a color of, well, let's say that's a shade of red. And let's go ahead and find out exactly what it does. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the brush tool, and then I'm going to go into the canvas and I am going to apply the keyboards combination over here. Now you look at where it's for Windows, you want to press Alt and then right click, and for the Mac you want to press Control, Option, and then left click, and let's see what that does. Now here I can actually just test what size brush I want by going left and right, and the hardness will be decided by me going up and down. Now, as you can see, I am actually able to see the different sizes of brush. Okay, I went left and right, and then I went up and down. Let's do it again. Okay. So this time, however, I'm going to be choosing a different color brush. There it is right there. Now I'm going to press the brush tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to move left, up and down, left and right. There you see. It's kind of going, showing me different kinds of options. At any rate, it's just a fun little thing here. See, I'm going left and right. I'm kind of shrinking it. And you can go ahead and try it yourself if you like, but there are other much more easier and better ways to decide on a brush tool than that. Alright, moving right along. Now let's go on into transparency. Now this is for basically any image that doesn't have a background, and transparent images allows you to put them in any kind of background. And the way that we know that we're dealing with a transparent background is if you look on the bigger image on the right side, it is a checker box image. In other words, you can have a regular image like a circle or another graphic element, but if the background has a checker, chances are there is no background. So let's press OK. And I'm going to go ahead and I will select File, New, and in my presets, instead of the typical white background, I'm going to choose transparent. And then I will press OK, and look at that. I've got my transparent background. There is no background here. So, what if I don't like blue? What if I want a different kind of color? Well, let's go back to the preferences. And this time I'm going to choose red, and well, not that just looks too harsh to me. I don't like that. So the default color that Photoshop uses is gray. So I'm just going to click where the red is and just put back in the gray. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to have white and gray together. Okay, so the left box is white, the right box is gray, and I've got a combination of white and gray, and I'll keep it that way. Okay, now we're going to go into units, and we have here set up in inches for the rulers, and type is for text, as I explained in a previous lesson. So inches is mainly used for print products. And on the right hand side you see that I have the resolution set at 372, okay, for print and web respectively. So I have this now currently at inches, and if I go to view rulers, I will find the rulers. There it is right there, and you notice that the numbers are in inches. Now let's go back and set it in pixels, and you will eventually see bigger numbers. And that's what we'll be using for the most part, although we will be going back and forth with inches. And right now you can just keep it at pixels and we'll go from there. Alright, now let's go on into guides. So I'm not going to go too much into this. Okay, guides already have default colors, which is blue. I'm going to ask that you keep it at blue, but if you want, I'm not going to be focusing too much on grids, slices, paths, and controls right now. Only guides. And so for the most part, we will press OK, and look at that. If I drag from the ruler all the way down, you notice my blue glide. Now the ruler is on the top and on the left, so you can use guides from both directions, and you can use multiple guides. Again, we'll go into this as we go through our exercises, and you'll have this appreciation on how beneficial using guides will be. The rest that you see on the left hand side, plugins to type to 3D and everything else below, I'm not really focused on for these. I'm not really focused on for these lessons. We'll just leave everything at default. And again, you're welcome to utilize any preferences that you want, whatever makes you comfortable, but you can always come back to the default, and we'll go from here. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and let's go on and finally start Photoshop.